Hello everyone, welcome back to The Vintage Reserve. This is our second episode in our $100 Road to Rolex, where we take $100 as an initial investment and try to flip that through watches and other cool objects and items that we find for really great deals and turn that eventually into a Rolex watch. Now, I was not planning on making another episode so soon. However, we did actually just have another watch sell, so got to keep it updated, want to keep everyone in the loop what's going on. So there actually is a small update. You do see that we have the Walkman still available. However, there was another watch that I recently came across, and it is this. This is a Spirina 21 jewel. It's kind of a vintage retro, kind of skin diver style watch. Doesn't really have much waterproofing on it, but this style became extremely popular, especially with the rise of the Submariner with Rolex. So most brands of the time really tried to throw something out there with that general style because it was what was popular and selling. Now I'm trying to keep this video a little bit more casual. The other one was pretty scripted, and I want to make sure that there's a little bit more going on the screen for you. So I wanted to kind of break down where we are with the finances so far. So we started with our initial $100 investment. We spent $80 on the Girard-Perregaux. We had $20 left after that, obviously. We sold the Girard-Perregaux. Now, the actual funds did come in from the Girard-Perregaux, and unfortunately, eBay fees are nothing to sneeze at. They take a good chunk of your profits. So the $250 plus shipping that the watch sold for, out of that we only ended up getting $205, which is still a lot of profit on that one watch. So with that, we had our total amount of funds up to $225. Then we had the $60, which we spent on our Walkman, which should hopefully further down the line get us a nice hefty profit as well, as again, there are very few of those listed at the moment, and most of them are listed at or above $400. I've got mine listed a little bit lower at $350 currently, just to hopefully get that sold, get the cash flow going. Then after that, we are left with $165. Now, something for those that are out hunting for watches, just a little tip. The Spirina, I did not buy just as this watch. In fact, I kind of took a gamble on this because what I found was not a single watch, but an entire vase filled with old broken watches. You can find these at a lot of thrift stores, sometimes antique malls. I don't really trust the ones at antique malls because usually the people that sell at those know what they're doing and they've looked through and taken anything that could potentially be worthwhile out of it already. But thrift stores get a lot of just junk watches in, and quite honestly, a lot of the staff there are not really well trained. They're working at a thrift store instead of a jewelry store. Some thrift stores do bring in professional jewelers to do their jewelry, so not all of them are like this, but a lot of the times you can find these glass vases just filled to the brim with watches that either weren't selling, or maybe they were just something that they didn't think had a lot of value, or even just the broken parts because they know that they sell. So what I did was I found a vase at my local thrift store, and it had quite a few watches in it. Because it's a glass vase, I kind of looked through it, and my general rule when buying vases of watches, if I can find one watch inside the vase that is worth more than the price of the vase, I will buy it. Especially when it's something that I think might be a bit more value than even that. This, though, like I said, was quite a gamble. Well, it was $30, so it wasn't a huge gamble, but I could not see the face of this watch. All I could see of this watch was just a little bit of the back. Now, I could see the back and I could also see the edge, so I could tell that it was a men's size watch, and I could tell that it had a ribbed diving bezel. Now, the reason that's a gamble is in this time period, anything from the 50s to, really the, late 80s, there were tons of brands that came out with dive style watches that looked almost identical to this, that were just junk. They weren't quality, they didn't do anything particularly well, and because of that, they don't really hold any value. Now, there's a few reasons I took a chance on this, because I saw a few things. One is that I noticed on the back of the case, I could just make out what looked like a Swiss-made stamp on the back. That doesn't automatically mean, though, that it is going to be something worthwhile, because again, these watches sold. They were a popular style, and from the 50s all the way up to, the 70s, 80s, there were quite a few companies that took advantage of the popularity and just the general provenance of Swiss made, that title. And what they did was there was quite a few companies that started watchmaking facilities in Switzerland, and they just produced garbage. And I mean, they were made in Switzerland, they're Swiss made, and there's actually a whole jumble of rules on how far you can go with actually calling something Swiss made or not. You'd be kind of surprised the things that they can call Swiss made without actually really feeling like it's Swiss made. But these were watches that more or less were Swiss made. They were just made terribly. They were just cheap companies profiting off the reputation alone. So because of that, and I've had quite a few of those watches in the past, many of them I found in those jars of watches. Because of that, I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to take the chance or not. However, there was one other thing about this watch from that I could just barely make out that made me want to take the risk on it. And that is because this watch has a screw case back, meaning that there's a bit more quality there. It's got some level of, seal, some level of water protection. Now, I would not actually classify that as a dive watch ever. The style is a dive watch. That is not a watch that you go diving in. It's rated to 5 atmospheres. But again, especially for the vintage ones, I mean, consider it, I wouldn't even wash my hands with it. But this watch, because it has that screw-on case back, has a really good chance of being a jeweled movement. And what do I mean when I say a jeweled movement? One of the things that makes vintage watches and the movements inside valuable or more valuable than others is the quality. And one of the things that makes a mechanical watch movement being one that's not battery powered, not quartz powered, that is all on springs and gears, one of the things that really pinpoints the quality is the number of jewels. And a jewel is just that. It's a synthetic ruby, which is used to reduce the friction between the pivots on either the mainspring or the gear train, all throughout the watch. And that makes it run much smoother, more accurately, and it also helps reduce wear and tear so that the watch will last longer and make it serviceable. Now, a watch you want to be serviceable because if something goes wrong or if it starts losing time, you want to be able to fix it. And a lot of mechanical watch movements, especially kind of what are known as the dollar watches, the kind of, you buy it and if it breaks, you throw it away and buy a new one. Even back before electronic watches, those were still a thing. Even before wristwatches, when they just had pocket watches, they even had dollar pocket watches that you'd buy. Farmers used them a lot and they didn't have to worry about them getting banged up or lost in a field. They would just go buy another one because they were so cheap. Weren't very accurate, but they were better than nothing. And these kind of watches, if they don't have a lot of jewels, anything like 7 jewels and under, or no jewels, almost always isn't serviceable because they either used rivets or some other kind of way of keeping the movement together that just does not make it easy or even possible to take apart to properly clean and service and replace the oils. So if it's not a jeweled movement and anything goes wrong with it, it's basically a lost cause. And then you'd have to either get a brand new movement or just give up on the watch. So a big factor on these old watches and their value is whether or not the heart of it, the actual movement inside, is something that is going to be fixable and serviceable. Is it going to be able to last almost forever? Because I mean, you can replace parts. So I took a chance. There was, again, several signs. I could tell it was a dive style watch, you know, not actually a diving watch. I could tell that it had the screw-on case back. There was some level of quality to it. So I took a chance, spent the $30 on the vase, and I was pleasantly surprised. I actually opened it up right then and there after buying it, because I needed to see what it was. And I was pretty happy when I saw on the dial for the Sperina 21 joules. Now, the thing with joules, once you start getting into like higher numbers, and high numbers is like 25, 26 or greater for a lot of watches, especially vintage watches, is sometimes a marketing technique. There were a lot of companies that realized, oh, more joules being labeled on a dial usually means it's a better quality watch. So like all companies, there were many that started taking advantage of that and started to take the joules, the synthetic rubies, and place them all throughout the movement, just embedded in the bridges and the metal in basically ways that did nothing. It was just bedazzling the inside of the movement. The joules are supposed to reduce friction as a pivot point. They're not just there to look nice. They are a very important part of the watch and what makes it function and be more accurate and wear down less. So not having a lot of joules was usually a bad thing. But if the joules are just all over the place and not doing anything, then it doesn't really matter. And there were several companies that started doing that, where they would take 40, 50, 60, 100 of these fake rubies, these joules, and embed them all around the inside of the movement, not doing anything. And they labeled their watches as, oh, 50 joule movements, which you'd see and be like, wow, 50 joules, that's amazing. This must be a really, really expensive, very complicated and extremely accurate and well-made watch. But they weren't. They were really no better than most of the general 17 joule watches, because usually only 17 of the joules were actually doing anything and made it just the same as every other watch. So you got to be kind of careful looking at it. That 21 joules is definitely within the realm of, that is just a watchmaker going a little bit further and adding a few more joules to make it just a better movement. A lot of modern watches, like I've got a modern Hamilton watch, which has 25 joules. So you don't need 30 plus joules in a watch for it to be good. You don't even need 20. I've got plenty of 17, even some 15 joule watches, which are decades old. And they still run, they still last. There's other factors that take into account the value and how reliable it is, but joules are kind of a key factor. So I was very happy when I saw that this does have a decent number of joules, meaning this is not a riveted movement, meaning that it can be serviced. A watchmaker, a professional watchmaker, can open this up, go inside and take out pieces that aren't working or are damaged or need replacing, have too much wear, or even just disassemble it, clean it, re-oil it, put it back together to help it run smoother and keep better time. And that is what makes it more valuable. Now, this watch specifically, it does run, you know, if we wind it up, it does actually start moving. As you can see, it's got kind of a cool vintage retro seconds hand there with the pointer. So it's also got the date function. So like I mentioned in the beginning, this has already sold. I put it onto eBay and I sold it for $200, which again, a really nice profit to add to our $100 road to Rolex, because we took $30 was the price of the entire vase. Now, unfortunately, there was nothing else in the vase of any value. It was all just 90s fashion quartz watches and just other junk. Nothing at all worth anything. But this one watch is well worth the $30, and obviously so, we've already sold it to make some profit. So I'm going to be getting this shipped off to its new owner, who is aware that it does have some timekeeping issues. I advertised it as running, but it does stop and does not keep great time. The movement is almost certainly due for a service. Watch movements in general, especially the older ones, usually manufacturers would say to service them every 5 years or so. There's a lot of different mentalities. Some people say don't service a watch until it starts having issues. Some people say service a watch every 5 years because if you don't, then little debris will actually degrade the movement faster, and if you wait longer, then the problem's going to be worse. Everyone kind of has their own opinion on it. I'm not going to really get into what's right or wrong. I feel it's your property, it's your watch. You decide what you're comfortable with. Watch services are also kind of expensive, so you got to keep that in mind. But in total, we have another great watch to add to this. And this challenge is really coming along. With this, the profit on it is going to be about $170. So with that taken into consideration, our new total is $305. So we are at $305 cash. Plus we still have the Walkman, which again, I'm hoping will sell for at least $350. Well, I've got it listed at $350, so I'm not expecting to get more than that, but we should at least be able to get $300 for that after fees. A lot of people on eBay do like to haggle a little bit, which is totally fine. I like to keep that into consideration when I'm listing things, have some room for negotiation, but not too much, because you also don't want to list it so high that you're ripping people off, or at the same time not getting the attention because it feels overpriced. So it's kind of a balancing act when it comes to listing things online for sale. Different people have different successes. I don't do a lot of quantity. I just do a few things here or there. So sometimes I will have them listed more closer to what I want them to sell for, and not have to worry about too much haggling. Other people that, even do this as like a part of their actual income or things. For me, this is just a hobby. I have a full 9-to-5 job. This is just a passion. I like going out. I always liked garage sales and antiquing and thrift stores. And then I figured out I could make a little money on the side. To me, this is just my hobby paying for itself. And trust me, you want your hobby to be able to pay for itself, because watch collecting specifically, I kid you not, is probably the second most expensive hobby in existence. The first being probably real estate collecting, but I mean, you could consider that really a business. Some people consider watch collecting a business. I'm not going to get into that. That's quite a rabbit hole with watch prices. If you buy a watch correctly, either pre-owned or one that's going to hold its value, I don't consider any watch something that's going to go up in value. That's just too much speculation. Buy a watch that you want to enjoy and wear, and if it goes up in value, great. It's almost certainly not going to, but there are a lot of watches that will hold their value very well, and you can be relatively certain that you're not going to lose much, if any, money on it when you eventually get bored of it and want to sell it down the line. That's, again, one of those main reasons why we're after a Rolex, because I am not a wealthy person. I worked really hard to be able to buy a house recently. At my age is, not heard of. I don't really have any friends actually that have houses, but I cannot afford this kind of stuff just out of my own pocket. I'm having the hobby pay for itself, and hopefully it's going to get us to something we're really going to enjoy. And it already has, because we've gotten quite a few watches already. We've got the Girard-Perregaux that we had for a time. We've got the Walkman and the Sperina, which again has already sold. I'm going to be getting that sent out in the mail later this evening. But I'm going to stop rambling here for now. Just that's the update we have. Let me know if you find this kind of style a little bit more entertaining or more interesting. This is just kind of me, kind of free flow, just rambling on and kind of doing it off the top of my head. The first video was completely scripted. Almost every word was scripted. I had never really made a YouTube video before, not a one that I actually felt like making public at least. I had one where it was a unveil of one of those jars of watches, and it was very good, in my opinion, for a very first try. But like a complete novice, I filmed it in the wrong landscape. So yeah, that would not have been fun for people to watch on TVs, because then you just have the, you know, the slit of, you know, video, and it'd be hard to see anything. But let me know in the comments again, is this something that you find a little bit more enjoyable? Is kind of the banter a little bit more interesting? Does it not feel as forced? Because I'm pretty much doing all this now in one take, and it's not really causing me too much stress. Before it was like getting the breathing down in certain spots, but you know, I digress. Thank you again. I really do appreciate, you know, the support on this. And for anyone that's interested, this is something anyone can do. All you need to do is either find a way to source watches or anything you enjoy and love, and then gain the knowledge to recognize value, recognize resale value, which most people you're going to innately get from anything you enjoy doing or collecting anyways. So then you just need a way to sell. I usually use eBay. That's kind of my platform of choice. There are other platforms. There are some people that exclusively just do garage sales. Some people exclusively go to the flea markets. There's a lot of different ways to do things, but I really encourage you, if you are like me and you love luxury watches, grail watches, and just the whole collecting and the history around all of these amazing items, but you just either can't justify or can't flat out afford to spend the kind of money that a lot of those much higher luxury brands cost, then make it a challenge. You know, do what we're doing. Work towards it. Start with something you can't afford, and then use that money to flip over and over and over, or save. You know, a lot of people think that's a little bit too much effort. I enjoy this, which is why it makes sense for me. This is almost a hobby in and of itself. Again, make your hobbies pay for themselves, and it will make your life so much more enjoyable when you don't have to worry about it, especially if you have a significant other and you have to worry about the finances. When you're talking about buying something like a Rolex, which even pre-owned, a Rolex, especially pre-owned, is going to cost, depending which model, like minimum like $7,000. We haven't talked really price on the Rolex because we haven't decided what kind of Rolex we want to get. I do like vintage watches, and there are quite a few less expensive, like vintage, like day dates and date justs. I don't want to just buy some, you know, terrible junker beat up, you know, Rolex, the cheapest I can find. That's no fun. We're not going to turn this into, you know, well, I was going to say we're not going to turn this into Hoovy's Garage, but for watches, but there's kind of a chance that might end up happening, because I do enjoy things that have character, as I like to call it, patina, have it beat up a little bit. It also makes it feel okay to wear. If you have something that looks pristine after 40, 50, 60 years of it existing, you feel a little bad if you're the one to start putting wear on it, but everyone's preferences on that are different. So again, we're gonna get this sent off. Let me know in the comments if you like this style better. This video is obviously going to be a little bit longer because of that. But again, this is the Vintage Reserve. If you are enjoying this concept, if you are enjoying these videos, please hit that like button. And if you want to follow along, subscribe. And there is going to be a link in the description to my eBay store, the Vintage Reserve. And there we're going to have not just watches that we are going to be using for this challenge, but we're also going to have other things listed, other odds and ends. I even have some other watches, things that I've come across and sell, again, just as part of making the hobby pay for itself. This has been the Vintage Reserve. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. You deserve it. We'll see you soon.